Okay, hello everyone. Normally, postmortems are made for games that have either been completed or fully released, which is not really the case with Ylands, since we're still in early access, but we're, I would say, in the final stage of our early access journey, so I thought it might be interesting to maybe share with you some of the good and bad things that happened to us along the way. Let me start with telling you what is Ylands. By the way, right now you're probably thinking that either we don't know how to spell the name of the game or that we don't know how to read it. But the fact is that it's both about Ylands and it also stands for your lands, because in the game players can create their own lands, their own games. And fun fact, this is actually how Ylands, the word, was spelled several hundred years ago. So what is Ylands? Ylands is actually two things in one. It's both a sandbox game and it's a platform where you can create your own games, your own adventures. We started working on Ylands some 5 years ago. We went through a lot of iterations. The visuals changed many times. In late 2015, we released the game, alpha version of the game. We released it through our own online store, so it wasn't available on Steam then. And later in December 2017, we entered early access. So the game part, the sandbox part, you are stranded on a desert island. There are many islands like that around you, so as soon as you build your first ship or boat or a raft, you set on a exploration or on a journey. You may follow birds in the sky. They will lead you to different islands. They can be anything from hot jungles to freezing Arctic regions with their own specific animals and plants, and most importantly, resources. There are hundreds of objects to be crafted and built, from primitive weaponry, from wooden shelters to large castles, modern buildings. You build ships, you build cars, and so on. Then there's the platform part, the in-game editor where you can create your own games with the visual scripting. Actually, the visual scripting is quite powerful, so you can even create games of completely different genres than sandbox games. It can be anything from multiplayer deathmatches to tower defense games, adventure games, puzzle games, RPGs, whatever. We give players over 5,000 pre-made assets so that they can create their own worlds. And most importantly, we have a workshop. It's not Steam Workshop, it's our own platform. And they can get both games and assets from this workshop that others made and use them in their own creations. And if they create something they want to share with others, they can upload it there for others to use. It can be anything from small buildings to whole games, but they can also share things like pieces of script. So it can be something really simple, but they can even share with others things like, let's say, multiplayer lobby, which other players can use in their own games. So let's talk about the early access. As I said, the game was released on Steam in December 2017. Since the game was out there, even before that, we actually managed, the good thing was that we managed to smoothly transition the players to Steam platform. And the reason why we went to early access was because we wanted, well, actually there were several reasons. Firstly, we knew that we would be adding a lot of additional features, and we wanted to have enough of players to get enough feedback. But also, which was probably more important, we needed to make sure that the game was optimized and that the multiplayer experience was good enough before we left early access. And since Ylands is a quite weird beast because you can create your own games there, which can be of different genres, we actually needed quite a lot of samples or players to be able to make sure everything worked correctly. But on the other hand, we didn't really want to have a lot of players right from the beginning, as weird as it may sound. We were trying to get really just enough for the testing. So when we entered early access, we did pretty much no marketing. But the game got picked by several large YouTubers who seemed to like it. They played it a lot. Their viewers asked them to keep making more episodes. So in the end, we ended up with some really nice sales. And we also had pretty good reviews, actually surprisingly good. After some time, the reviews and the ratings of the games went down. And even though right now they are quite low, I would still call that like a healthy ratings or reviews, because if you check the negative reviews, most of them actually say something like, I really like the game, it has a great potential, but this thing is broken or the multiplayer is still laggy, which is actually, well, definitely it would be better if all reviews were positive, but this is the better option because these are the things that we can do something about. We are actually doing something about them. So, for example, the next update, the big update that is coming out, will make the game much more optimized and run better. And it's definitely better than if it was the other way around. If the review said the game runs smoothly, it never crashed on me, but it's like super boring. So let's talk about what went right. One of the things that players talked about a lot, or that reviews mentioned when we released the game, was the presence of microtransactions in the game. And it was because of several reasons. First thing is that Ylands is a premium game. It's quite a huge game. It was huge back then. It's even bigger now. And it's sold for $20. And we promise people to keep updating it for many years to come. And with free updates, with free large updates, we don't plan to do anything like paid DLCs. And to be able to do that, we need to have some steady income, something more than just from what we get from selling the game. But the bigger issue seemed to be that the microtransactions were there even during the early access period. And even though some may argue that this thing actually wasn't that well, or that it was a problem, or that it is still a problem, I actually think that the monetization is one of the things that actually went right, or one of the things that we did well. And let me just quickly tell you what our monetization system is like. We call it fair to pay, because we give players a lot of free content, and on top of that, there are some premium things like emotes or pets. But every single time, there are objects that come free in each of these categories. And also, when players get the game, they get, along with it, quite a lot of in-game currency, so they can purchase these things. And the most important thing, or the reason why we wanted to have it present in the game from day one, from the very first day we came to Steam, was because we told players that we wanted them to understand what the game is going to be like when we leave early access. Because the last thing we wanted was for them to become attached to a game that had no microtransactions and to introduce them when we leave early access. I'm pretty sure they would feel really bad about it. They would feel probably like we betrayed them. So we told them that, and we also told them that to prove that it wasn't a way for us to get money during the early access, we told them that, and we actually did that, that we won't be adding a lot of content, premium content in the game during this early access period. So in the end, actually, and this shows that you can't really please everyone, there were players who got angry with us and kept saying that we failed them because we weren't able to provide them enough premium objects for them to buy. So there's no pleasing everyone. Also, quite obviously, as I said, the presence of microtransactions led to some negative reviews, but eventually we managed to win the players over, and so they created a community that came back to our help. So eventually, after some time, next to posts that said, this game looks interesting, but I'm never gonna play it because there are microtransactions. Next to that started appearing posts that said, well, I thought the same way, but then I tried it, and really you should give it a try because what they do seems to be fair. They are not forcing anything on players, and you can definitely go through the game without ever buying anything. So that was one thing that I believe went really well. Another thing that helped us a lot was the pre-Steam stage, because during that stage we managed to create our own forums. We built a first small community. We connected with the players. We created some tools, and for us it's very important that with every update we release that we keep backward compatibility. And during that phase, before we went to Steam, actually we released one update that with which we managed to corrupt some of players' save games. We learned a lot from that, and when we entered Steam, we already knew like how to test it more on what to do and what not to do. Also, we managed to learn how to release updates before we went into early access. Another thing that went well, engaging with the community. This isn't really something that is a secret or dark magic. These are some common practices. Obviously, you need to have a great community manager. It's good if you have your own forums, because many games think that they can get away with just like using Steam forums, which is a little bit unfortunate. As long as you have your own forums and Steam forums as well, you will notice that they both attract different kind of players, and the players that are coming into your own forums are definitely the ones that are more helpful and more engaged with the game. Another thing that we had to do, players weren't very happy about some issues taking too long to get fixed. And actually, at some point, we thought that we would ask them to report issues into a bug tracking system. But then we talked about it, we talked with them, and we realized that actually many of them didn't feel comfortable with doing something like that because it felt too technical. So at least for the time being, we still get their reports on our forums. But what we do is whenever they report an issue, we take it, we put it into our inner bug tracking system, and to that post that they made, we put the number that it has in our system, so that at least it's important that they know that actually something is happening about the bug. And also we put their state of the bug and we keep updating it. So when players go to the forum and to the specific section, they can see right away that all the issues, all the bugs are noticed by us, and that some are already fixed, some are being fixed, and that is very important. Also, we keep doing weekly dev diaries and sneak peeks. These are forum posts and sometimes even video dev diaries. And mostly we talk about things that are in future that we are planning, or about things that we are working on right now. But we also keep going through the forums, and we are looking for players who are complaining about something, or we see when we are looking for some heated discussions. And when we find something like this, we when we see that that the players have some concerns, the next dev diary we make is always about this. We tell them, we notice that you think this will be a problem or that you don't like this. This is why we're doing it. This is what we plan to do with it. And please talk to us, discuss this thing with us below this post. And then below the post on forums, in the discussion, we keep talking to them until everything is settled and everyone is happy. Also, important thing is that what was really good is that we meet players at game events such as PAX or Gamescom. For smaller companies or studios, it's normal that the developers go themselves and they are there to talk with players. But for companies that are bigger, and Bohemia Interactive now has over 400 employees, it means that sometimes they hire third-party agencies that provide people who then stand next to the computers, and unfortunately many times they have no idea what's going on in the game. But every time we go there, you can find just people that are working in Bohemia Interactive. You can talk to designers, programmers, artists, and players really appreciate it. The last thing, sorry. The last thing that I think went really right, or that we did right, is because we have a great we talk to our community a lot. We get a lot of feedback, and the important thing is that the players see that what we get from them is actually reflected in the game. So a lot of game features are actually directly influenced or affected by what players tell us, and not only things that are newly made. We obviously keep getting and analyzing feedback for features that are already implemented in the game or that have been there for a longer time. And it happened actually several times that we found out that something that we put in the game didn't really work. And at that point, we are not afraid to either remove it completely or change it. And in the next dev diary, we tell them why this happens, or actually we tell them before it happens, and we tell them that it was just because we thought it would work and it didn't, and that we were wrong. Also, we get a lot of feedback through our in-game feedback tracker, actually hundreds and maybe thousands of suggestions. But obviously, we can only process so many things at one point, and also many of the things they want is something that we know we'll be working on in the future. So we put it aside, and when we plan new features, we take a look at this list. And it's always good for players to know that even if something isn't possible for us to put in the game right now, that eventually we will get back to their ideas and try to make them work or put them in the game. And also, a very important thing is that when I talk about feedback, I'm not talking only about players telling us about specific features, but I'm talking about them talking about everything that's going on with the game. And I'll give you one example, which is called Red Shell. I don't know how many people have heard of this. Basically, it's a third-party plugin which is used for marketing purposes. This would probably be better explained by someone from marketing department, but unfortunately for you, you're stuck here with me, so my explanation will have to do. What this thing does is that it tells you anonymously from where are players coming. The players that buy the game, it tells you, okay, this player, he came from, or you don't know if it's a he or she, but they came, they bought the game after they clicked this banner, or they bought the game after they clicked this link below this YouTube video. And this is actually a good way for you to see which channels work the best when you are trying to spend some money on marketing. Unfortunately, as I said, we didn't put a lot of budget or effort into marketing Ylands, but we definitely plan to do so when we're leaving early access. So we thought it would be nice if we had some numbers and we knew where to put the money then. But unfortunately, and also the Red Shell plugin is something that a lot of other AAA or AAA games are using or were using. At some point, players became very, I would say, unhappy or about the fact that some games, not just Ylands, had this tool because they felt that the fact that it's getting information about them that are not coming from the game itself, even though the information or the data were anonymous, that it basically was kind of a spyware. And it became actually a big thing. It turned into, I wouldn't call it a witch hunt because to a certain degree they were right. But I would definitely call it a spyware. But I can, on the other hand, I can see why why someone might be concerned about this. But the thing is that they contacted us and told us that they feel really bad about us having this in the game. We immediately started discussing with them what the tool or the plugin did. We pointed them towards the web pages of the creator, but pretty quickly it became apparent that they were like really uncomfortable with us still having that in the game. So even though it made our marketing department very unhappy, we decided to remove it. We were actually one of the first games that removed Red Shell plugin, and many others have followed since then. It wasn't really a difficult choice to make because the community is the most important and most valuable asset that we have. Okay, so now to the popular segment about what went wrong. These things aren't necessarily just what went wrong, because some of them are just things that were bound to happen or had to happen, but they were problems that we had to tackle. So let's start with this, and this is because our team, we are very enthusiastic and we are very excited about the game, and we take pride in us communicating with players directly, and there are no like days before actually someone gets to talk to players when they ask about something. But unfortunately that led to some poor communication or misunderstanding, especially in the beginning. The thing is that we have something, and we've had it ever since we started working on the game, something called the Awesome and Crazy Ideas list, where we put a whole lot of weird and awesome ideas about features we would love to have in our game one day. Many of those features are things that have never been done before in games, and many for good reason. But we still want to try that to get at least some of them into game eventually. That's why we are waiting for Ylands to leave early access to become Ylands 1.0, that we consider a foundation, and from there we can build on it, we can add those crazy ideas. This list isn't public. We didn't talk with the players about those features, but there are some other that we plan to have, and we talked about them, about those with them. And what we didn't know is that players can, sometimes they have what I would call a selective hearing or reading. And it means that if you, for example, tell them, because you're super excited, they ask you, so what does the future holds for Ylands? And you say, okay, in future we want to go to space. So for someone, the future means in 2 years, but for someone, the future means in 2 months. And if you say something like this, that it's the chances are actually it's quite likely that in 2 months you will be dealing with angry players who will be asking, where the hell are my spaceships? So we had to learn the hard way to be very careful when talking to players about things like that, and especially about like when we about dates, whenever, because the thing is, I'm a obviously player myself, and I really hate it when I'm waiting for some nice game to come out, and I'm really trying to find out when the game is finally going to be released, and the devs are saying when it's ready or when it's done. But eventually, we found out that actually this is the only safe way of talking to players. I mean, obviously, we can give them some rough estimates, and we still do, but we are very careful when we're doing that. On the other hand, if you are this vague, you have to keep them in the loop. You have to keep telling them what is it that you're working on. You have to keep telling them that you are making some progress with some features. And also, and this is quite interesting, and actually I was quite surprised by that, even though there are a lot of articles and videos where people talk about how games are made, a lot of players still have no idea how difficult it is or how long it takes from having an idea and getting a feature implemented, or they don't know how some things are difficult to fix. So what we're started to do is, actually several times when they were really unhappy about something taking too long, we explained to them in detail actually what needs to be done for this feature to be implemented or for this bug to be fixed. And a lot of times we actually got reply that would be something like, okay, I had no idea, thank you for explaining this to us, and they were less stressed and angry about that. The biggest issue we have right now, and that's why we're getting quite a lot of negative reviews, is because we are definitely behind the schedule with optimizations and fixing multiplayer issues. And some of these things are because we just sucked at making estimates for a long time. And some of them are because, for example, we relied on a third-party solution. Ylands is a game where the whole world is fully destructible. You can modify the terrain. And we used a third-party solution we got on Unity Asset Store, which seemed to be a very cool idea at that moment because we got something working real fast and it looked good. But eventually, we found out that that piece of code became a bottleneck, that it was poorly documented, that it wasn't really clicking with the rest of the game. So we had to slowly rewrite that code, which we are still doing actually, and it took us a lot of time and effort to make things right. Also, the problem with Ylands is that it's a very difficult game to optimize because, as I said, not only it's a completely dynamic world with no static maps, with no static entities. We have tens of thousands dynamically simulated entities, but also there's the editor which lets players create their own games, so they can do pretty much anything. They can put, if they decide to, they can try to put hundreds of thousands of objects into level. There's this visual scripting, and it's possible for them to try to actually program things in the visual scripting, so you can have them, instead of working with things like evaluating when something enters a trigger zone, you can have them actually calculate things in tight loops within the script, which unfortunately right now takes a lot of time, but it's something we're working on as well. So yeah, that's another problem that we had. Fortunately, and also it has something to do with the fact that we are using Unity engine. We are not using our own engine, and which means that you can only get only to a certain level when you're trying to do something, but when at some point you just get stopped because you can't get deep enough inside the engine and change some things. Fortunately, Unity engine, they have made a great progress in the last few years, and especially in last months. So because of the latest beta, we are able to release. We're going to release an update, and I already mentioned that which will make the game run much better. Also, another thing that we ran into is player-based stagnation. This is because of two things. If you're trying to keep your player base from stagnating, and actually most of the time you actually want it to grow, what you do is you keep introducing new cool content. But unfortunately, we have gotten into a stage where we're mostly fixing and polishing stuff, which means that even when a new update is released, people are happy about the fixes and about some things working better than before, but this isn't something that would bring new people or that would make players that left the game return. And another thing which I call marketeer's nightmare is the fact that we decided not to promote the game until it's fixed enough and polished enough, which means that the players who are making the current community, they see that there are no new players coming into the game, and that makes them think like maybe the game is dying, maybe. And actually, funny thing is that the last update that we released, 0.10, it was a huge update. It contained a lot of fixes, and the community loved it. But actually, shortly before that, there were players who started saying that Bohemia Interactive actually abandoned the project, that no one is working on Ylands anymore, while in fact there were close to 50 people working very actively on the game. So this is really a problem for us, but what we're doing about it, we're trying talking to them, and we try to explain that things will get better, but right now we are in like a weird period that we hope to get from quite soon. We hope to get to the point where we'll be polished enough and good enough game so that we can leave the early access, and at that point we will focus on getting new players. And the last thing I want to mention, which proved to be a problem, was rapid team growth. Those 5 years ago, we started in 4 or 5 people. Right now there are around 50, close to 50 people working on Ylands, and the team has grown rapidly, especially in the last 2 years or year and a half. And the problem is the rapid growth resulted in the team being, let's say, quite like junior, with not enough senior programmers, or well, basically not enough seniors of anything in all departments, and that led to a lot of problems, mostly to us making poor estimates, and subsequently to us releasing updates with delays, people not really being very happy about that. And the thing that proved to be very problematic was also the fact that when you're like 5 people, 10 people, you're most likely in one room. The way you work is that you just stand up, you walk over to your colleague, you tell them what needs to be done, they remember it, you remember that you ask them something. This really can work as long as there's 10 of you, even when there are maybe like 20 people. But when there's 30, 40, 50 of you, you definitely need to change how the system works. You need to start with different workflow. You need to start making things into tickets, into tasks, in system. And if this change comes quickly, that's a big problem, because people need to change the way how they think, they need to change how they behave. And fortunately, I think that the worst is beyond us, and things are stabilized now, or at least definitely they are better. But this was definitely one of the big problems that we faced. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for listening. if you have any questions, you can ask them now, or you can find me around later, because I got only to touch some of the issues only on the surface. Thank you.
Okay, who has questions?
You've told me that you react to the public's opinion. What's the critical dosage of one specific opinion on which you will base your conclusion? Will you change something or not?
Yeah, actually that's a good question, because for example, when I was talking about that red shell plugin, it all started with a single person who basically who was very critical of us, and we found that when someone is loud enough, no matter what they say, a lot of people will follow. And then it's really up to you. I mean, when we were discussing internally whether to remove that plugin or not, there were some voices, obviously marketing guys, who said we shouldn't like give in to players this easily, because we don't believe this thing is a spyware. It does what it does. It does what it says it does. But it's always, I mean, I don't think there's like a general rule. It's always about the particular case or about the thing that people are talking about, that they want or that they object to. For this, it was quite obvious that it wasn't going to stop, that more and more people were uncomfortable with that. And also, at some point, it really, when people become aggressive and when there are enough of them, that thing is it just starts snowballing, and many times it's no longer possible to have like a proper discussion about these things. So you just have to decide whether to go with what they want or don't, and it can be settled by discussing it. So yeah, it really depends.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I have a question about the initial community. How do you convince people to buy the game in early access? Why then they don't wait for the final product? Especially with Ylands, which is a new game. It's not a sequel to successful series like Arma.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I would really love to know answer to that, and I don't. I'm not gonna hide the fact that we were ourselves surprised that a lot of people bought the game. I don't mean like that we would think it's bad or anything, but yeah, the thing is that especially YouTubers, they have a really great influence now, and all it takes sometimes is one guy who just likes the game, and when it's the correct guy and when he likes it enough, and the video is good enough, it can like make all the difference. So I would love to know answer to that, but unfortunately I don't. Sorry.
Any further questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A very, very honest presentation. I've been through a lot of those pains myself, so I have nothing but empathy for where you are. Thank you very much. Please put your hands together.
Thank you, guys.